Let's move to the wide receivers. I think that's where a little bit more of the interesting conversation takes place. And again, we'll go in sort of reverse order. Jarvis Landry was wide receiver 37 last year, 12.5 points per game. Anybody who knows me knows I love Jarvis Landry, respect the heck out of him as a player. He had not missed a game in his career until last year when he had to miss one due to COVID protocols. Remember, there was all those COVID issues with players being exposed to somebody. He's never missed a game due to injury, though. The guy is always out there on the field. Every year in his career, he has at least 100 targets. But last year, Matthew, we saw something very different. He didn't score in the first 12 games or 11 games of last season. It was very bizarre. Have the days of targeting Jarvis Landry passed us by in fantasy football?
To me, they have. Yeah. Because, to your point, I would actually use the Tyler Boyd argument that you made here on Jarvis Landry. Look, his ADP is wide receiver 40. He's going in the 11th, 12th round, somewhere in that turn. So, like, whatever. He doesn't cost anything. It's fine. He's fine, but, like, to me, Jarvis Landry is the wide receiver version of James White. Like, is he a very good NFL player? He is. Yep. Is he solid? Yes. Is there a floor there? But unlike Nick Chubb, where there's a very high floor, there's a low floor for Jarvis Landry, and where he's going. He's going Tyler Boyd, Devontae Smith, Michael Gallup, guy, right? Debo Samuel. Like, I'd rather like any of those guys.
Yeah.
Devontae Smith could get a 25% target share this year.
Right, we don't know. I mean, there are so many lottery tickets that we've talked about a million times, right? About the wide receiver spot. There are guys that we won't even bring up during the podcast over the next couple of months. Like, Corey Davis got $12.5 million per year. Like,
exactly.
Doesn't that tell you something, right? Like, he's probably going to be a pretty useful player for them.
Yeah, reports out of Cowboys camp is they're moving Michael Gallup all the way around. Like, we love Michael Gallup's talent. It was just where they got Cooper and they got CeeDee Lamb. But, like, we expect that offense to be one of the best in the NFL. Like, Michael Gallup and Debo Samuel, like, guy needs to stay healthy.
Darnell
but there's
Mooney's generating a lot of buzz. Like, there's just so many guys who you could at least talk yourself into 1,000 yards.
Exactly. And just Jarvis Landry is just sort of like, yawn. Like, again,
respect
him as a player, respect him as a person.
Yeah.
Like, nothing but mad respect for him. And, you know, by all accounts, like a great teammate and one of the leaders of that team.
He's
and
a
like,
dude. Yeah, for sure.
But fantasy-wise, you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's just, in terms of where he's going, like, you'd rather chase upside.
So, speaking of chasing upside, this is one of the great upside conundrums in fantasy football this year.
Can I bail on this one?
Can we just say no?
Yes, I just want to pardon myself from having any Odell Beckham Jr. takes this year.
I don't either. I believe he is the hardest player to rank in fantasy this year.
I would concur. Where do you put him?
Is there a player in fantasy football that has a wider range of outcomes than Odell Beckham Jr.?
I don't think so.
If he finishes the year as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, is anyone shocked? Because of the talent and, you know, we expect Baker to take another step? Of course we're not, because he's that good.
Right, it's like surprised, not shocked, right?
Surprised, but if he also crashes and burns once again and is the 4th best pass catcher fantasy-wise on his team after Landry, Higgins, and Austin Hooper, is anyone shocked?
Right. Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah,
I don't know what to do with Odell Beckham Jr.
So here's what I've done. And we actually both have him at wide receiver 34, interestingly enough. Daniel has him at wide receiver 31.
Why do you love Odell Beckham Jr.?
I don't even know. I feel bad now a little bit inside now that I've seen that. I want to move him down to 34 with you guys.
Every year, you're going to hear the same thing. Odell's going to look, coming off of a major, he's going to look amazing. Because he's Odell. Right. He's ridiculous. The guy is an unbelievable talent. I just don't know what to make. But that was every piece of evidence that I can give you for why Odell could break out this year applied last year and the year before. Nothing's changed. He's still dynamic. He's still electric, incredibly fast. The Browns have a capable quarterback in Baker Mayfield, smart offensive mind in Kevin Stefanski calling plays. But sometimes, the only thing I can say, Matthew, is that sometimes it feels like there's a pressure built in when having Odell Beckham Jr. on your roster to get him the ball, that it starts to work backward. But 2 years ago, we really saw this, right? Like, his red zone targets or his end targets were absurd.
Baker's numbers are better without Odell Beckham Jr. As insane as it is to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're not saying whether it's cause and effect and right. Yeah. Totally. But I mean, just pure stats. Baker's numbers are better without Beckham on the field. Like,
he's super confusing. It's super confusing.
I will say I think the drafters have bailed us out of this one, though.
They have.
And I'll tell you why.
It's absurd.
He's being drafted as wide receiver 26. So I think they're bailing us out in that, like, because Like, to
That's
me,
too
he's a
early for
fade.
me. Yeah.
That's too early for me. He's going ahead of Juju Smith-Schuster. He is going ahead of Michael Thomas. Like, if you're going to take a flyer in that range on an injury-prone wide receiver that has massive upside, why wouldn't it be Michael Thomas? Odell Beckham Jr. has missed at least 4 games in 3 of the past 4 seasons. Since joining Cleveland, okay? He's wide receiver 39 on a points per game basis.
39.
Wide receiver 39. Since he's been in Cleveland on a points per game basis, he's wide receiver 39, 12.9 games. He's had 3 games. Only 3 games in Cleveland where he's had more than 20 points. He's had 2 games with over 100 receiving yards. And I bet one of them was that Monday night game against the Jets where he took that one pass 90 yards or whatever.
It was,
right? That one
Greg
big
Williams
play.
revenge.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. And so, you know, Thirsty Kyle found this. He is 75th out of 89 qualified wide receivers in fantasy points per target since he joined the Browns. And obviously some of that is the touchdowns, and they tried to get him the ball. He had that weird year where they just could not get him the ball in the end zone despite, you know, throwing it to him a ton. But, like, Michael, why would you not want Juju Smith-Schuster or Michael Thomas, both of whom have also been elite fantasy receivers, candidly more recently than Odell Beckham has?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know that Michael Thomas's injuries concerns are any greater than Beckham's at this point in their careers.
It kind of reminds me of the emotion side of fantasy football because what's the expression? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Right.
I think that's going to happen with people this year, right? Is they're just going to say to themselves, I know there's
Been there,
a world.
done that.
Yeah, I know there's a world where Odell finishes as a top 5 wide receiver, as you noted. But I also drafted him last year, and he did very little consistently up until he got hurt. So I do wonder if maybe that ADP will correct itself a little bit as we get closer and closer to this season.
Yeah.
Field, can I ask a real quick question? Because I know we're moving on here.
Yeah.
Other than those 2 pass catchers, you basically have Rashad Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Neither of those guys are guys that you're really targeting in redraft leagues. But
I don't think so.
In
Anthony
dynasty
Schwartz
leagues,
is sort of interesting. Yeah.
Donovan Peoples-Jones, do you like him?
He's getting a little bit of buzz. I actually like Higgins.
Yeah.
Do
Here's
you?
why they're interesting.
I do.
So Higgins is they re-signed him this offseason. He's back for 1 more year. But what's interesting about the Browns, and again, I don't want this to turn into a salary cap conversation, but the Browns have a lot of players who are young and about to get paid. Some of them have already been paid, like Myles Garrett. Baker needs to get paid at some point. Nick Chubb just got paid. They got a lot of money currently sunk into 2 wide receivers, Odell and Jarvis Landry. At some point, you're going to have to make difficult decisions across your roster.
Yep.
Those are 2 players that are often speculated upon as potential other trade or lease candidates down the line, not right now. So I mention that only because a year from now, this wide receiver group could look very, very different. I don't have, like, I agree, like, Higgins is my favorite because I know the most about him. At the same time, he could also be gone a year from now. So,
I mean, like, the last pick in our Dynasty League draft was Anthony Schwartz, who's a rookie out of Auburn that they like a lot. Like, you know,
who can fly.
He can absolutely fly. So, like, that's a guy that, like, I'm stashing in our Dynasty League because
Yeah, you
in
never
a year,
know, right?
a year from now, maybe he's something.
Again, the bill eventually comes due, and the Browns,
Right.
who have a lot of success recently and we're active in free agency, are going to have to make some moves.
That's really interesting.
I do want to, I know we're running short on time here, so I just want to make sure we get to Austin Hooper.
Yeah.
I have Austin Hooper as tight end 13. I think Austin Hooper, who is a good player, and they signed to a lot of money, I think Austin Hooper might be a nice option for those that go cheap at the position, that don't get one of the big 3 and decide to sort of wait and don't want to get into the middle sections there of the, you know, the Hawkinsons, the Logan Thomases. Maybe they don't feel great about Tyler Higbee, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I actually think outside the top 10, I like some Austin Hooper.
He had a good stretch in the middle of last year. Not a lot of yards per reception last year. It was much more like in between the hashes work for him. At some point, something's got to happen with David Njoku, right? And if he was gone, it's one less domino that sort of impacts the Austin Hooper production train. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have a great feel for him. I like the player a lot, like the person a lot too. Like he knows fantasy well. Like we appreciate the players that embrace it, like he does. I don't have a great feel. I don't mean that. That's sort of vanilla. I don't know one way or the other.
Browns ranked 4th in tight end target share in 2020. And again, I just sort of feel like a reliable, good player, second year in that system. Again, I'm expecting Baker to take a step forward, and Stefanski does like to use his tight ends in the red zone. We saw that harkens back to his time in Minnesota. So give me some Austin Hooper as a little bit of a sleeper this year. Yeah,
at some point, you're going to have to just make some guesses on these tight ends that aren't part of that clear top 3 and then not part of that next 5 or 6. And there's a lot to choose from, but there are certainly very reasonable options, Austin Hooper being one of them.
Guy was a #1 tight end in fantasy at one point. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's
I like guys in history at one point, too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I like guys that have proven success at the highest level, which Austin Hooper has in recent memory.
And he might also be really interesting in Dynasty because I just mentioned a year from now you could have a whole new wide receiver group, and David Njoku is going into maybe he has one more year beyond this on his rookie contract. But still, something could come to a head there. What do you got, Daniel?
True or false, just as we're ending this, true or false? At the end of the year, all 3 Bengals wide receivers will have more fantasy points than Odell Beckham Jr.
True.
I'm going to go 2 out of 3, so false.
2 out of 3?
Yeah. Higgins and Chase. God, that's weird to say, huh?
I'm gonna my rankings say all 3.
Yeah, I have all 3 as top 30.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm wrong, but I'm just like, I'm telling you in terms of if I drop by my rankings, and I do.
It doesn't feel nice to say.
It's just the Battle of Ohio.
It's super
I'm
weird.
just curious.
Yeah.
It's super weird, and I'd say that Field is right. Obviously, taking the Field versus, no pun intended, versus one player in Beckham, but like,
yeah.
Good thought there. All right.
I appreciate you letting me. I thank you for fielding my questions. Again, no pun intended.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.